Many Formula One cars had shining moments, even if they weren't the car of a particular season. But sometimes bad luck, timing, successive driver errors, reliability issues, or simply because someone made an even better car, prevent and have prevented them from winning championships. Cars that even won races, some took pole positions, caused trouble, they fought until the end. But they won't be immortalized in the history books with that little trophy next to their name, or in a more modern case, on Wikipedia, listed as champions. There are several very good Formula One cars, made by competent people and driven by top-level drivers, that failed, and that's what we're going to talk about today on Splash and Go. Good cars that didn't achieve the ultimate victory. The title, let's go. First of all, as always, just to clarify, this is not a ranking, it's not an academic work, and it's not a definitive list, especially because there are many good cars that didn't win championships. So we can do edition 2, 3, 4, and the comment section is open, and it's an invitation I'm extending so that you can list others that aren't here. But my criteria were the ones that came to mind first. I started listing them, and then I wrote a little script with information about each one. All right. It's not a ranking. It's not just a list of 10. There's more. And the first one, the AMR23, represented a significant change, or at least it seemed like it would be. At Aston Martin, under the technical direction of Dan Fellows, coming from Red Bull, and chief designer Eric Blanding, the car immediately caught attention in the preseason. It was a radical change in concept, which had already started at Aston Martin in 2022. At the time of the Barcelona Grand Prix, it immediately sparked fury in Christian Horner, all because Dan Fellows was Adrian Newey's number 2. When he left Red Bull back in 2021 and spent some time in quarantine, he saw what they were doing with the RB18. And when does Aston Martin change direction in 2022? Horner thinks they're copying us. But Dan Fellows' first actual creation would be the AMR23, which caught attention in the preseason. And when it came down to it, it performed really well with Fernando Alonso. And not just with Fernando Alonso, let's be honest, because Lance Stroll, with his injured wrists, in the first race in Bahrain, he finished in 6th place. What makes me think, including in what could have been a race with Dragovic replacing Stroll if he hadn't been fit. With him, in the first part of the championship, Fernando Alonso scored 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 podiums up until the Canadian Grand Prix, finishing all the races and coming in 4th in Baku and 7th in Barcelona. In the second half of the year, Mercedes, Ferrari, and especially McLaren arrived. But that was still enough for Alonso to finish the year with 206 points, placing 4th among the drivers. It was a beautiful car, but Aston Martin ended up losing its way in the development race. But everyone, including me, thought, wow, it'll be fun to see Alonso win a race after such a long time. But it wasn't meant to be. The Jordan 199 was the most successful car from the friendly Irish team of Eddie Jordan. Driven by the duo Heinz-Harald Frentzen and Damon Hill, it finished 3rd in the Constructors' Championship, and at one point, Frentzen was considered one of the contenders for that title, especially because Schumacher was out of the race after breaking his leg at Silverstone. Frentzen that year drove the car beautifully in what was probably his best year in Formula One. And he won 2 races, one in a heavy downpour and another at the Temple of Monza. With McLaren and Ferrari having very inconsistent seasons, he would have had 54 points if Gil had done just a little better. In a season where he was already focused outside of Formula One, he only scored 7 points. Maybe Jordan could have troubled the 2 in front, but it wasn't. Designed by Gerard Ducarouge, who would later create the Lotuses for Ayrton Senna in the 80s, the Matra MS120 was the first project from the French manufacturer after it split from Tyrrell and Jack Stewart. In Monza, Jean-Pierre Deltoise was battling against Jack Hicks from Ferrari for the win. But something I just thought of could make for a little story. He ripped off the visor and the tear-off visor all at once. and he had to retire because you can't drive at 300 km/h without eye protection. In 1972, Matra reduced its operation to just one car, which would be driven by Alonso, considered by many to be the unluckiest driver in Formula One history because he never won a Grand Prix. I'm already giving a spoiler that it's not going to happen. At least not valid for the championship. He won a race that didn't count for points. In the past, there was a lot of that. Eamon was on pole, facing strong opposition from Danny Holm and Jack Skurt. Bravely, he held the lead until he was betrayed by a stone on the track. And it had already claimed other victims and ruined things. His race too? He, has a slow pit stop. Back then, every pit stop was slow. He came back in 8th and climbed up the pack again to finish in 3rd. But Matra would end that year, and it would leave Formula One as a team. The March 711 is a classic in Formula One and is often mentioned in lists of quirky designs. And why not? It could appear in our series on gadgets. Designed by Robin Herd and Frank Costin, the car had a front wing that looked like a flat ironing board. And why not? It could appear in our series on gadgets. Designed by Robin Herd and Frank Costin, the car had a front wing that looked like a flat ironing board. And with this weird layout, you can't say it didn't exceed expectations, because everyone thought when they saw that thing it would be a failure. Through the incredibly talented and revered Ronnie Petereson in the 71 season, he managed to get several podiums. There were 4 second places and 1 third, which led the Flying Swede to a runner-up championship, although still far behind Jack Stewart and fundamentally without winning any races. But he was close, very close, maybe the closest anyone has ever been to it. Because that tight finish in Monza, with C5 cars within 0.6 of a second, had Peterson in the middle, among them fighting for the win. At the finish line, almost. These 2 cars from the 1984 season appear together because they had the same engine. So a lot of that time was about the turbo with shared DNA. Lotus had Nigel Mansell and Helio De Angelis, and Renault, Derek Patrick and Patrick too. Lotus had a more reliable car and finished the Constructors' Championship in 3rd place. And Renault, losing to the customer team, ended up in 5th. Mansell was close to winning that legendary Monaco Grand Prix in the pouring rain, but he crashed on his own. Warwick, no, another team was let down by the suspension here in Jacarepagua while fighting for a win. Both cars were competitive, but reliability issues and above all fuel consumption prevented both from fighting for anything more. Designed by Tony Southgate, the Shadow DN5 was one of the fastest cars of the 75 season. In the hands of Jean-Pierre Jarier, he achieved 2 pole positions, but he was prevented from turning them into wins due to technical issues. The lack of reliability took Shadow out of the fight, even though they had a fast car, making sure that the best results, especially of course the wins, were in the hands of Ferrari, especially with Lauda, and McLaren, especially with Emerson. But you can't deny that the Shadow car, which was fast, was also very nice, by the way. I told the story of this team, the Shadow, in this video here. Link in the description. A team that was owned by a former agent of Cigar. I recommend you watch it. This was possibly the most competitive car from Bar, at least while it had this name, since it would become Honda, which would turn into Braun, which would later become Mercedes. Designed by Jeff Williams, heel Jenson Button. Benetton suddenly reborn in Formula One after a really strange period at Benetton, and other years at Bar, fighting to get out and then fighting to stay. I've already told this story. In some video from Calma, I don't remember which one anymore, Benetton achieved 10 podiums that year and even secured a pole position in Imola at Ferrari's home track. But, and there's always a but, even though the car was good, there was another one that was even better. Because it was the year of the F2000 of Michael Schumacher, a car so fast that it surprised Ferrari itself during preseason testing, with them thinking that the gauges and instruments were wrong, because nothing justified that a car could be that good. And it was. Because nothing justified that a car could be that good. And it was. The Brabham BT45B was the last car driven by Jose Carlos Paz in Formula One, and he raced this car in just one event. In South Africa, the team had debuted the year with the BT45B. The BT45B raced in 2 events in Buenos Aires and São Paulo, and Pace finished second in Argentina. He retired in Brazil, raced with the B model in South Africa, and retired again, losing his life in a plane crash in Mariporã. Taking his place is the German Hans Stuck, teaming up with John Watson. Watson was close to winning in Monaco and Zolder, but he had mechanical issues. The only time he finished, he came in second. There were fewer breakdowns, and he managed to get 2 third places, plus 1 fifth and 2 sixths. In a year filled with retirements and fuel consumption issues, the flat 12 from Alfa Romeo. I was really thirsty. This here is a big acquaintance of ours. After struggling in the 1992 season, McLaren made a big investment with their partner TAG. From Ronnie Mansour's partner Auger and reached Williams. Calm down, the car was technologically very advanced and managed to catch up with Williams. Yes, sorry, but it's true. Incorporating brakes, ABS, active suspension, and electronic transmission, which allowed the driver not even to have to shift gears. Designed by Nigel Oatley and with a shorter wheelbase, it was a very interesting car that had a little engine there. 50 to 60 more horsepower would have made it more challenging. This, combined with the year when Ayrton Senna had his best season in Formula One, driving the Fino, he won 5 races: Interlagos, Donington, Monaco, Suzuka, and Adelaide. It wasn't enough to win the championship, although Senna finished second and also secured second place for McLaren in the Constructors' Championship. And on top of everything, it was very beautiful. The 2005 season saw the debut of Adrian Newey's last project for McLaren. He, who had already left to work for a new team called Red Bull. The relationship with Ron Dennis had started to sour in 2003, and I'll tell you all about it in detail. In teams that we love from McLaren, I promise, I will, the MP420. It was a very fast car and incorporated aerodynamic solutions a la Newey, very bold ones, that sometimes sacrificed reliability. You might be wondering, but what does aerodynamics have to do with a car that breaks down a lot? Newey always tried and continues to try to pack the car's aerodynamics as tightly as possible, which harms the cooling nozzles. The race car is a hot thing. So you already understand, his cars often, they had problems because they were overheating in the hands of a duo that couldn't be more opposite. Kimi Räikkönen and Juan Pablo Montoya, both very fast, both still at their peak. The car won with Räikkönen from the start, and after Montoya got the hang of it, he started winning too with the Colombian. But the Achilles heel was reliability. They faced an opponent in the other garage, Renault, almost as fast as it was and didn't suffer from those problems. And then Alonso's first championship came, but it was beautiful, it was very fast, but to win it can't break. Under the technical direction of John Barnard, with Henrique Scalabron as chief designer, the Ferrari 641 is, for me, one of the most beautiful cars in the history of Formula One. It was the culmination of a long effort by Barnard since the end of 1987, where he faced a lot of uphill battles in Maranello, trying to convince the Italians about various things that were already common in English teams, like McLaren, Williams, and Benetton, who went through a lot of struggles in Maranello, trying to convince the Italians about various things that were already common in English teams, like McLaren, Williams, and Benetton. Benetton, English? Yes, factory in England. If you want to know more about this, I recommend watching the Ferrari tetralogy, 2 hours and 7 minutes, covering the entire history of the red team and some really special and fun details from that time. Barnard had been working on a Super Formula One car since '89, and he hadn't even revealed the 640 by the end. And the semi-automatic gearbox and the 641 was state-of-the-art. A fast, balanced car already with paddle shift, then receives perhaps one of the best drivers in history, and the best option that wasn't Ayrton Senna. Alfa Prost, they had already worked together at McLaren in '84. In '85 and '86, winning 3 championships, 1 with Lauda, 2 with Prost, and all 3 Constructors' Championships. It was then a formidable package to take on the McLaren Honda of Ayrton Senna. But the Best car, according to the regulations, is the one that finishes the races. Otherwise, you don't earn points. Otherwise, you don't win the championship. You can't escape that. Otherwise, it turns into a beauty pageant. And the 641, which gave Ayrton Senna a hard time with Prost and the steering wheel, kept breaking. He left the Frenchman and left Nigel Mansell hanging several times. But he got 3 pole positions and 1 races. And then you add it all up, the car wins less, breaks down more, scores fewer points, loses the title, even though the decision of that championship was somewhat turbulent. So, this is my top 10, which has more than 10. I don't even know how many ended up on the list. Of very good cars, but not good enough because they didn't win championships. There are definitely several missing, so I leave the challenge to you to prepare the list for me to take and then write the scripts for the following editions. In a few months, I'll come back here, look for and grab your poppets. And we move on. So that was another episode of Splash and Go on YouTube. I hope you all enjoyed it. Just leave that blessed, like it's free, it doesn't cost anything. You know, for those who don't know, I'm telling you, break this down for me and don't forget to share your hype with us too. This YouTube tool for you to say that the algorithm is the algorithm. I like this channel. I like these videos. You can keep handing it to me. You can give it to other people. That's the only way we keep moving uphill. Rising to the gallop, how has that been happening in the last few months? If you want to receive notifications about this content all the time, stuff comes out around here. We have Telegram and WhatsApp channels. You'll always get an automatic message on your phone. We also have our social media that are showing up here. There's content all the time. Instagram, Twitter, Threads, and TikTok. By the way, my personal Instagram is Rodrigo_flat and go. You can follow me, see behind the scenes content, where I'm going, and so on. Links are also in the description. 2025 is going to be an amazing year. There's a lot happening around here. So to not miss anything, stay tuned. Thanks. And that hug.